Hi everyone, and welcome to this special coronavirus and MS podcast. My name is Helena.
And I'm Lydia, and we both work at the MS Trust. So times are a little bit strange at the moment, aren't they? So we normally would do these podcasts together in our office, but instead I'm at home and Helena, you're at your home as well.
Yeah, so if you wonder about the sound quality in this podcast, it's just because we're having to do all this via phones.
And as you might have guessed, we're here to talk about the coronavirus. Yes, and I know that everyone is talking about it now and it all feels very strange and scary. But that's why we thought it was important to discuss what it means for the MS community. And Helena, you've got MS yourself. So how are you finding watching the news and just trying to follow all the advice which has been given by the government?
It's just so confusing. I mean, should I be self-isolating? Am I a vulnerable person? How do I get my medication? And where can I find the advice that's reliable? It's all a bit too much, really.
No, I definitely hear you. And I thought it'd be a really good idea to kind of look at the advice given and how people with MS should be interpreting that advice.
And we also wanted to talk to you, the MS community, on how you're finding it and if you have some good coping mechanisms in these weird times. But first off, we want to talk about coronavirus itself. Right, the first person that we're going to chat with is Janice, who works in the MS Trust Info and Engagement team. Chances are, if you've ever called our inquiry line, you might have spoken to Janice, as she's worked there for many years, even more years than me, actually. Janice is also our go-to person when it comes to keeping up to date with the world of MS research. She's just finished writing a whole new entry on the coronavirus in our A to Z. Hi, Janice. How are you?
Hi there, Hi, Helena. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So people with MS are very worried and confused right now. Could you start telling us what is the coronavirus and what's it doing?
Okay, so the coronavirus is a virus. It's a new strain of the coronavirus, and the actual name of this particular strain is COVID-19. So that's why you're seeing those two different names appearing in the media. So for this particular strain of coronavirus, the main symptoms are a new and continuous cough. In other words, that means you started coughing repeatedly, and a high temperature. And you can check that by if you touch either your chest or your back. If that feels hotter than it would normally be, then that indicates you might have a high temperature. You might also, with coronavirus, notice a shortness of breath. If you develop those symptoms, you should stay at home for 7 days if you live alone, or 14 days if you live with other people. If you want to get some more information on that, you can look on the NHS website, and they have some good information about what you should do if you notice symptoms.
So there's a lot of confusion about immune systems and MS. For example, some people think that people with MS immune system is lower than the general public. Is this true?
Well, this isn't really the case. In fact, you could say that your immune system is overactive because it's attacking the coating of your nerve cells. So if you like, it's actually doing more than it should. So I would say that, for people with MS, their immune system is not lower than the general public. The one exception to that is if you're taking one of the more effective MS drugs, they work by damping down your immune system. So there is a risk that if you're taking one of those more effective disease-modifying drugs, they might make you more susceptible to the coronavirus. We have some information about this, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about it later on. But if you're really concerned, you can have a look on our website, and we've got some more information about which of the disease-modifying drugs might be a bit more of a problem. I think it's also important to recognise that the government have identified people who they think might be more vulnerable. So what this is saying is that although people with MS are not more likely to catch coronavirus, if somebody with MS or one of the other underlying health conditions that they've identified, if somebody were to catch coronavirus, then they're potentially more vulnerable. In other words, they might develop more complications from coronavirus. So the government is suggesting that people with underlying health conditions, including MS, are particularly careful to avoid infection, and that means, doing things like washing your hands very much more carefully, trying to reduce your contact with other people. So I think, the bottom line is people with MS are not going to be more susceptible to the coronavirus, but if they did contract it, it could be a more serious, they could have more serious complications than somebody without underlying health conditions.
Right. Thank you for setting that straight. If you are on DMDs or any other sort of treatment that might affect your immune system, what should you do?
Well, I think the very first thing I would say is don't stop taking your medicines unless you've been advised to by a health professional. That's the first bottom line. And I think if you're especially concerned at the moment, do try and get in touch with your MS team, either your MS nurse or your neurologist. And I appreciate that might be difficult at the moment, but try giving them a call or use the normal routes that you would go through to speak to a member of your MS team and get their advice. The disease-modifying drugs that might increase your risk of catching coronavirus, there's 4 of them. They're Gilenya, Ocrevus, Mavenclad, and Lemtrada. Now, I think it's important to say for most people, the benefits you're getting from taking these drugs in terms of fewer relapses and fewer lesions showing up on MRIs and so on, those benefits will outweigh the slightly increased risk of infection. So overall, it may well be worth continuing with taking one of these drugs. And in addition, stopping some of the drugs, like, for example, Gilenya, that can cause a sudden increase in MS activity. So that would be, at this point of time, it wouldn't be a good idea to be in that position. So, again, probably there's good reasons for continuing to take one of these disease-modifying drugs. But I think it's very much a case of reviewing your own situation with your MS team, having a talk through and agreeing what's best for yourself. And, it's a shared decision. You can take your own view on this to your MS nurse or neurologist, and they will have their own views as well. And between the two of you, you can reach a position that you're both comfortable with. But if people are worried, they should definitely get in touch with their neurologist or their MS nurse and get feedback.
Sorry, do we know if the neurologists and MS nurses are sort of operating as normal as they can still? Have we heard any stories otherwise that the neurologists are?
I believe that they are still working as much as they can. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. Have you heard anything like that, Helena, or picked that up on?
Not sort of been shut down or anything like that.
No.
So reports of it yet, but I just wondered if there were any murmurs about it. But so it's very much still get in touch with your MS team. They might be overworked, but they will probably get back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we maybe have heard of 1 or 2 health professionals who perhaps have developed symptoms of coronavirus themselves and are self-isolating, so there may well be MS nurses, for example, who at the moment aren't able to respond to telephone messages. So, I think equally well if people in MS teams may be diverted to other activities within the hospital. So it is a very difficult situation at the moment, of course. So, very fluid, everything's changing. So, but I think, if you possibly can, if you're worried about one of these disease modifying drugs, do try and get in touch with your MS team. We have heard, again, this is very, very limited information, but it does seem that there's been we've heard of a very small number of cases of people on one of the disease modifying drugs who have caught coronavirus, who have actually got a coronavirus infection. And as far as, the reports that are coming out from those people is that those people seem to be doing okay. They're not, they're recovering well from the coronavirus infection. So at the moment, it's looking as if people got on a disease modifying drug manage fine when they do catch coronavirus. But obviously, the data is still very, very limited at the moment. So, we'll have to keep a lookout for that. Keep it.
That's interesting, though. But fingers crossed that that's the case.
Yeah.
So what about this one question that we hear an awful lot about now? The social media, you know what's coming now, don't you? But what's coming all the time on Facebook and I'm sure on the inquiry line as well. Should we all be isolating for 12 weeks now if we have MS?
I'm not sure if this is the case at the moment. I've been looking through lots of the guidance documents that are coming from the NHS and from the government just the last week or so, and I haven't seen anything in the government documents so far, but I believe that the Prime Minister hinted at this in a press conference earlier this week and talked about highlighting a group of people who have the most serious health conditions, I think were the words that were used in the press conference, and finding ways to shield them from social contact for about 12 weeks. We don't have the details of that yet. The indication is that perhaps we'll be hearing more this weekend or maybe shortly after the weekend. So one of the things that I want to be able to see is what is actually meant by the most serious health conditions. That could just be, well, that could refer to people, for example, who are very seriously unwell. So people perhaps who have just had an organ transplant and they're taking drugs to suppress their immune system to prevent rejection of the transplant. It could be people who've just gone through chemotherapy. So it could be, people who are really very ill, and it may not actually refer to the sort of more vulnerable group, which, does appear to include people with MS. But I think, irrespective of all of that, the question about self-isolating for 12 weeks, I think it's very sensible for, people with MS to take more care over things like hand washing and, the coughing and so on, and blowing the nose, being extra careful to avoid infection through that route. So I think you perhaps, it's not necessary to be really, really careful about it, but certainly, do take more care.
If we would be self-isolating or if you're not, I suppose as well, will the drugs still be delivered as they should for your people who get like DMDs or other drugs sent home to them?
That's a good question. Yes, because this is the same issue as how do I get food supplies and all the rest of it, and obviously continuing to take disease-modifying drugs is something that will be very important to people. Well, as far as I know, I believe that home delivery services will be doing everything they can to get MS drugs delivered as usual. I don't know whether, Helena, have you heard of anyone having problems with this? Or
I have not seen anything about it yet. I'm on disease-modifying drugs myself, and I had a delivery I think it was 2 weeks ago, so I'm not due one for a while yet.
Yes.
But I haven't seen any, because generally, because I look after the MS Trust Facebook group, I would have seen some posts about it. So hopefully, fingers crossed. I mean, the deliveries does seem to work. I think, if it's with people stopping work and everything, it seems like the delivery companies are hiring more people, if anything.
Yes, I think I'm sure the home delivery services will we'll be doing everything they can to keep the delivery going, and I'm sure they will be contacting people if there are changes in arrangements. If people have their MS drugs delivered to, say, an office address, it might be worth trying to, thinking about that and seeing if it's possible to have the delivery address changed to perhaps a home address, if you're anticipating working from home or other, so thinking about where your drugs are currently delivered to and whether there's a more practical place, looking ahead to perhaps a situation where maybe we are all working from home or, staying at home, that would be a sensible plan to make.
We talked a little bit about talking to your MS team and getting in touch with them. But if you need to contact them, or if you actually have an appointment where you need to go into a hospital, or any other medical appointments, doesn't need to be anything to go with your MS team, should you still be going to the hospitals?
Well, I think if you have an appointment and it's already been planned, like, for example, going in to see your MS nurse for a regular review, if you haven't heard from the hospital that appointment has been cancelled, I think you should go as planned. The one exception, of course, or the difference, of course, was if you do have a cough or a fever, then don't go to the hospital. If you have an appointment booked with a member of your MS team and you're concerned about going to the hospital, I think, do ring them and check to see if you should still attend for the appointment. And of course, yes, if you're concerned, for example, about continuing to take one of the more effective DMDs, then contact your MS team in the normal way. But as we were saying earlier on, bear in mind that NH services are going to be very stretched for quite a while. So it could be you may not get a response from the team immediately. So give them a little bit longer perhaps to come back to you.
I think we're all getting used to the new normal still,
Yes.
aren't we? It's a quite tricky one. And we mentioned the whole thing about MS being considered a vulnerable condition.
Yeah.
But if your MS is more advanced and you are worried about, things like breathing difficulties or other disabilities, is there any special precautions that you should be taking?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Helena. If your MS is more advanced, if you have more severe symptoms of MS, then the chances are if you were to catch coronavirus, you might be at a greater risk of developing more complications such as pneumonia. So I think the best advice for somebody with more severe MS would definitely be to follow the guidance to self-isolate. Be very, very careful to avoid contact with other people as much as possible, and extra careful about hygiene and so on. So I think, for people with more severe MS, more advanced MS, take extra care. And perhaps for that group of people, it would, if you can self-isolate, then that would be a sensible thing to do.
I think it's the message that sort of comes out of all of this is better to be safe than sorry.
Absolutely, yes. Take the extra precautions to avoid the infection. Absolutely, you're right. Better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. And if people have questions, the MS Trust inquiry line is still open. Because we are getting a lot of questions, and I'm guessing most of the questions that are coming through at the moment is about the coronavirus.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Well, we're keeping our inquiry service open. We have a new arrangement whereby, if you can possibly, if you have a question, send us an email to ask@mstrust.org.uk. But if you can't access us by email, you can phone our free phone number, which is 0800 032 3839, and leave a message on our answer phone. And we'll be picking up those messages. If you leave a message with your telephone number and your name, and perhaps a very brief overview of what you're concerned about, we'll be picking up those messages from the answer phone ourselves, and we'll be calling people back. As I say, we're doing our very best to keep the service open, as we absolutely appreciate that people are all very confused and looking for more information, and lots of different. Everyone has a particular circumstances that make them unique, and lots and lots of different questions are coming through.
Yeah, definitely. And also it's important to bear in mind that even with the corona scare and a lot of questions about corona, MS is still MS, and people will be having other questions that have nothing to do with it, and they will still want to get answers.
That's absolutely right, Helena. We tend to forget that, but life goes on, and MS is still a concern for a lot of people, and there's still all sorts of aspects of MS that people want to ask us about. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
So get in touch with us. We're still here.
Yeah. And take care, everybody. Look after yourselves, and it is a worrying time for everybody. Absolutely.
It is. Thank you so much for talking to us, Janice. This has been really, really useful and interesting.
Okay. Thank you, Helena. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. So I normally work in an office in Hertfordshire with the rest of the MS Trust team, but our office is now shut and we're all working from home. And our next guest on the podcast is my workmate Marissa, who works in our fundraising team, and as myself, has got MS. Hi, Marissa. Thanks for chatting to me today. apart from the fact that we shut our office and everyone is working from home, could you tell me why you are self-distancing at the moment?
So I'm currently self-isolating, self-distancing because I had an Ocrevus treatment the second half of my first round last week. So I'm trying to be really, really careful and making sure I don't pick anything up, especially the coronavirus, obviously. So it's just to keep myself safe, really, yeah.
And were you giving that advice? Because you were self-isolating a little bit before us, the rest of us, weren't you?
Yes.
Did they gave you that advice when you were at the clinic then?
They did, yeah. When I went for my infusion, they said that they'd actually cancelled them and then decided to bring in anyone who was having the second half of their first round, just to make sure that their first round was actually effective. But they were really advising that we stay away from large groups, that we try and avoid, anywhere where a lot of people would be touching things as much as possible. So just really we're advised to be as careful as we could be for the foreseeable future, especially working from home if that's possible. So yeah, but they were so lovely when they were giving us the advice, and it sounds quite similar to the advice that everyone's receiving anyway. I think we just got it a little bit earlier than everyone else did.
Yeah. No, it really does seem like that's what's mostly going down at the moment. Yeah. But how are you finding it? How are you finding being at home?
It's definitely a transition. I would say it's harder than you'd expect. I'm sure everyone who's at home is finding that, but it is about keeping things as normal as possible, I think. I'm trying to kind of get up and go to bed at the same time and find a bit of a routine. Obviously being able to work from home, I think we're really lucky and we are having something to fill that time. But even when we're doing that, making sure that my window's open and I'm getting fresh air, and making sure that my desk is all clean and tidy, and that I'm remembering to drink water, even though people aren't running past me to fill up their water bottles every 2 minutes in the office. So yeah, I think it's trying to keep things as normal as possible, really. It's making it a bit more manageable.
Yeah, it's funny that thing about tea rounds and remembering to just go and fill up that water bottle.
Exactly.
And I keep on just drinking a bit too much coffee, which is not good because then I keep on running up to the loo instead.
Yeah, 100%. How are you finding it?
It's very strange because you kind of look out the window and you see people going outside and doing normal things, and you think, okay, so here I am sitting in a lockdown almost. But so I'm having to have the kids at home as well because my husband, he's coughing. So it's quite strange to have the children, but they've been really good. So there's lots of like online resources for learning, and they've, as you were saying about having routines. So we actually sat down and did like a schedule for them that, okay, this is what you do for an hour here, do an hour there, you go outside for a bit. And I think, especially for children as well, it's good to be outside and get some fresh air. So I think the routine thing is really something to help. I was looking at the Mind website, and they were talking about things like keeping it tidy and clean around you as well, because that will sort of make you feel less anxious because the kids, they were trashing their rooms when they were having their lesson. And I said, well, you wouldn't do this in school, would you? You wouldn't sit here with all this. And it's the same as if you're in the office, you would probably not be sitting in your pajamas or have lots of trash all over well, I say that I have a very messy desk at work.
It's not too messy, but yeah, every day I've been making sure that I get dressed. I think that's a really big thing. You kind of have to keep doing what you do normally, and actually we are allowed to, as long as you feel like you're well enough, you are allowed to go out and exercise as long as it's in a space that isn't around too many people. So I've been trying to kind of go for a walk and get a bit of air because I'm luckily able to do so. But I think it's really important to get outside as well, just not to anywhere where people's going to cough on you or you're going to touch things that are covered in germs. But I think fresh air is just so important.
I was asking in our Facebook group that we got if there were any tips that what people were doing, and a lot of people were saying things like gardening or stitching or drawing. I got one guy who was talking about building Lego, and I thought that was brilliant because a lot of people will have some Lego or something like that at home, and then people were saying things about getting a list of projects that they haven't done before, like a DIY stuff and things. So
Yes, it's really, yeah, just being creative, I guess, and keeping your mind going and not allowing yourself to. I think one of the main things is that I keep needing to not let myself go for a nap because when I'm home, I love napping, and I think it's just, making sure that I'm filling my time so that I don't enter this really horrible sleep cycle, because sometimes, when you have time off or anything, you just end up napping and then all of a sudden you can't sleep until 11 p.m. and then you're waking up at funny hours, and yeah, it's taking a lot of management, I think, is the overall thing. But yeah.
I think that, the napping part, I try to get up and do, so I've got a step counter, so I'm sort of up and trying to move around. I do find if I sit still for too much, fatigue just gets overwhelming, and so you have to sort of open the window or do something to try and not kind of fall into it. How are you doing about practical things like shopping and
things like that? Yeah, I mean, so luckily, so me and my partner, we haven't been stockpiling any tinned goods or anything because we're very aware of people who can't do that. But we decided to actually buy a lot of fresh fruit and veg and try and kind of batch cook that a little bit. So luckily we've got some stuff in the house already. But we have done, a click and collect that we're going to pick up next week from Tesco. And there's actually a taxi company in Cambridge who are offering to pick up your shopping for you and leave it on your doorstep. So there's definitely ways, around things. There's also a really lovely WhatsApp group that's been started around where I live, where you can sign up, and they're trying to allocate a representative to every street that's around me. And it seems to be doing quite well. Like, we actually have people signing up for all the streets around. So that's really positive. So I feel like if I did start to kind of panic about things like shopping, there are so many lovely community projects starting to crop up everywhere. And I always feel like if I maybe phone, my local council, or if I phone Citizens About, like, there might be some way for people to give me some information on what's available. But I think it can be scary times when you think about simple things like food, and when nutrition plays such a huge part in keeping your immune system up and keeping you healthy when you have MS. It's really taken quite a lot of thoughtfulness. But I don't think I'm too worried. I think there's lots of really good options out there. And I also have a lot of friends who are self-employed, who actually could do with me giving them a little bit of cash to go and pick some stuff up for me and bring it and leave it outside the house, because they have no way to make any money. So there's lots of different things. What have you been doing?
Well, I think the same sort of, we had a delivery come yesterday, and there were loads of things that weren't there. There was no pasta, there was no baked beans and things like that, no toilet paper. But I had some friends that have sort of helped me pick up some bits, and very much like we were saying about the WhatsApp group, there's been similar initiatives done here in where I live. And I think that thing, I get really, really touched and really sort of happy when I see how incredibly creative people are and using the amenities that they're, using technology for good. And I think it's, it might be really hard times. And when you're feeling down, it's quite nice to think about how extremely kind and helpful people are and how much they want to help.
Yeah, 100%. I think my heart goes out to anyone who isn't, like really elderly people who perhaps aren't using social media, and I really hope that there are some initiatives out there as well for that situation. I mean, I tried to call out on social media saying, if anyone does need any company or wants to have a chat on the phone and don't have anyone to speak to, but I just don't know how it's going to reach people really. But yeah, I guess things will start cropping up, and amazing charities like Age UK and things like that, they'll be doing things along those lines, I assume. But it's really, really difficult.
I've seen people that also do, they have signed, there's little pieces of papers that circulating around, but they sort of says, this is my number, I live on your road, give me a call if I can help you out with anything. So my friend who came by yesterday with some food for me, she's done that all down her road. So, because there's quite a lot of old people that live in our neighborhood, so you do worry about them. I think that you really hope that they won't be sort of isolated, because it's quite easy for people who are savvy and can get a hold of these things through technology. But if you're not, then so we need to help these people. What effects do you think this whole scare has on people's mental health?
So I was having a bit of a think about this, and I think if you're putting it specifically in the context of having MS, I think it's just, I mean, when you have MS, you're constantly living with this fear of the unknown. I think that's something that no matter what your symptoms are, everyone kind of shares this inability to understand what the condition is going to do to you. So when I was thinking about people's mental health, I think people with MS are pretty well versed in that and worrying about the unknown of an illness. But I think it's more about being classed as one of the more vulnerable in society. And I mean, I'm nowhere near being old enough to be 70 plus. So I think when you're a lot older, you're more aware of being vulnerable when it comes to illnesses. But all of a sudden, I'm being classed as one of the most vulnerable, and I think that has a huge impact on your mental health. It's fabulous that people are thinking about people with MS and motor neuron disease and other conditions, but it really brings with it a lot of anxiety because you're put on high alert constantly, and I think there's a lot that comes along with that. I think also people being very worried about you. So currently, as bless her, my mum's phoning often during the day, and I'm kind of being told, no, I don't want you doing this, no, I don't want you doing that, and I think that also has an impact on your mental health. But I think it's pretty unavoidable. I think it is, and I think everyone's feeling quite similarly as well. It's just about looking after yourself and making sure that you potentially limit your social media intake and reading the news. And I now read it in the morning and in the evening, and that's it. Whereas before I was checking it all day, and I'm starting to think that that's potentially not the best thing for your mental health actually at this point in time.
Yeah. I think when we had the swine flu scare back in 2009, I think 2010, I can't remember when it was, 2009, I was at home with a newborn at the time, and I remember sitting watching the news the whole time, and I was just terrified. I would not let anyone come into the house to see me. I would let my mum come from Sweden to visit because I was just terrified. It does make weird things happen with your mind when you just constantly watch the news, I think.
Definitely, yeah. But I think with mental health, in general, with having to stay in, even if you don't have MS, I think it's just about ensuring that, like we were talking about before, being creative, making sure that you don't slip, especially if you have pre-existing mental health issues. I think having to be inside a lot and limiting social contact can be really damaging, especially if you're prone to depression. So I think what we were saying before was really valuable. People just need to make sure that they stay creative and use as much social media as they can, or try and get as much contact as they can with people without putting their health at risk, I think. And yeah, definitely limit the news.
Do you think you have any other tips to give someone with MS to cope during this time?
I think it's just reiterating the points that are constantly being made. Nutrition and well-being have such an impact on your MS, no matter if it's advanced or newly diagnosed. So I think when you have a bit of a routine and you're able to go outside, or you're not having a disruption in your day-to-day life, you do, like we said, remember to drink water and you remember to eat well. But I know for a fact that for the last couple of days I've eaten so much sugar because I've just been home, and you just kind of think, oh, this has been a bit rubbish being in all day, I'll just treat myself, and actually that's going to do nothing for me in the long term. Making sure that you stay really healthy, and that if you do end up catching something, your immune system has the best possible chance at fighting that off. Staying in touch with other people with MS, I think being able to use the MS Trust Facebook group and voice your concerns, because nobody understands what it feels like unless they've got the condition. So I think ensuring that you're having somewhere to voice it where it's truly being understood. And I think just don't be scared to ask people to help you. Don't be scared to ask them to be more hygienic when they're dropping things off. If you have a partner, don't be scared to say, sorry, but you can't sleep in here anymore. It's your health first. And I think that's the most important thing. And just try and alleviate as much stress as possible, because I don't know about you, but for me, when I'm stressed, my MS just goes off the chart. All my symptoms just go off the charts. So There's so many good meditation apps, and I've actually been doing a lot of journaling, and that's been really helpful for me to kind of just get everything out and make sure I get a good night's sleep.
It can be quite hard to get to sleep when your brain is going, 100%. Isn't it? That's some really good points there, though. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Having me join. Yeah, it was really great. And also, obviously, the one thing that I kind of forgot was asking any questions to your healthcare professionals, because I've seen a lot online. There's a lot of false information out there. So before people get scared, just making sure that you have the correct information.
Yeah, always fact check things. We always make a point of saying that there are things that we put up on our website is evidence-based, and there, especially now, there's just so much stuff flying around, crazy things flying around, because people are desperate to come up with a cure for this, and then I've seen some strange advice out there, but check your facts.
But and I look forward to seeing you when we get to go back into the office. Stay safe and stay healthy.
You too. Bye-bye.
Now, the next person we're going to talk to is Emily. Emily has MS, and she writes a blog called The Wibbly Dinosaur, which we absolutely love in the office. And we thought we would chat to Emily about what it's like to have MS in times like this. So, hi Emily, how are you doing?
Remarkably calm, actually. I think, like everyone else, I'm pretty confused as to what I'm supposed to be doing, and whether or not MS is considered a risk, makes me considered at risk. I've seen on a government site that multiple sclerosis is listed on there. Although initially I was a bit confused because there's no, certainly for me, I don't have any problems with my heart or breathing. So I didn't know if that would put me at risk. But I am concerned if I did get it, because just getting a cold completely screws my MS up, and I don't think it would be very fun.
No, and I think that's the thing about, we always get the offers to take the flu jab, don't we? So I suppose that's why we end up on the same list as people, because
exactly.
I've seen so many questions today from people that are saying, well, my MS is mild, or I don't get affected by this, or I don't show any symptoms. What should I do? And then it's such a big grouping of people, this sort of just people with MS. We're working on trying to get our wording right from the MS Trust to help out, but it's confusing, because I think everybody, even the government and the NHS, don't really know what is going on at the moment. So, and it changes from day to day.
It's crazy.
So one of the things that I find is that there's just so much overflow of information and so many advice, this and that, and watching too much of the news can be really quite scary and make you anxious as well. How are you dealing with all these sort of overflow of info?
Gosh, I'm trying to avoid the news. I mean, people keep saying things to me, and I think, I should probably watch the news because I don't know what they're talking about. But watching too much news is damaging anyway. Whatever's going on in the world, it's never good stuff. And I think that if you suffer with mental illness, then watching the news is a pretty bad thing to do. Likewise, looking at too many online forums, you've got people who aren't experts in anything giving you all this advice, and it's like you don't know what you should believe, and I think you can become a bit too obsessed with it. And I find just stepping away, looking around me, okay, everything's calm where I am. So I try not to get whipped up into a frenzy with all the social media and the news,
because it's very easy to do. And I'm sitting, because I'm working from home at the moment, so I'm sitting here sort of listening to the news, and then when I turn it off and sort of look out, the kids are outside playing, and life is very much the same, but not. So it's very strange times. But I think exactly that constantly listening to the news will just completely overwhelm you with anything, really. And at the moment, it's the only thing you hear when you put the news on.
Part of my concern is it's all very well. I don't mind self-isolating myself. It'd be a problem because I have a job and I've got kids to get to school. But with my husband and kids being out and about, getting on as usual, it kind of feels almost pointless worrying about isolating myself if they're going to be bringing stuff home with them. So I kind of feel like we all need to be self-isolated if it really is a risk.
Yeah, no, I think that's the really tricky thing, isn't it? Because when you look at the advice and it says, well, use your own bathroom or use this and that's not really applicable for a lot of us because, we're 4 people in this house and we only have 1 bathroom. So you can't really do much about that situation. But I guess we just have to sort of stay put and wait for the advice and the things to come.
Yeah, I think that's all you can do, really. I have no problems with being told kind of what to do by the government. If they say you need to stay in, that's fine. I'll stay in. We'll just have to find stuff to do.
Yeah.
But likewise, I'm not stopping my normal life. I've been out today. I've been to a supermarket today. I've been to a counselling session. I've done the school run. I've got to do the school run again in a bit. I'm trying to carry on. I'm just washing my hands a bit more and not touching stuff quite as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked about turning off the news, but have you got any advice to people who are feeling anxious about it all? I mean, I know things like touching things or washing your hands and being people sneeze can set off some people, can't it?
I don't know that I have any real words of wisdom. I mean, all I can say is what I do myself, and that is to just distance myself from the news. I think it's important to be informed. If you do need to isolate yourself, that you need to know that. But really, just try and distract yourself from it. Watch a good film, pick up a good book, play with your kids. Don't watch the TV, and just try and carry on as normal as possible.
Yeah, I've read
because I don't know what else you can do.
I've read a lot of people sort of use the advice of if you are self-isolating and you can't work from home, for instance, that there might be like those jobs around the house that you always put off. That maybe that could be the time to sort out the.
Yes, I know my dad has a huge list of DIY that he's intending to do over the next few months. And I think our house needs painting actually. So if my husband is off work, then I might get him to do that.
Yeah, so it could be some useful time put in place in this as well.
It could, yeah. I guess it depends on your circumstances. I'd probably be a little bit more anxious if I was house sharing or lived in a flat, but I'm lucky to have my own house with a garden, so that does make things a lot easier for me.
Yeah.
But I do feel for people who are not so fortunate or in worse situation.
But there is a lot of other charities like Mind and that have got lots of useful information on their website already about the coronavirus. One of the things they were saying about the garden, that could be advice of actually going outside or even just, looking out the window and seeing the sky and seeing that, it's all there still. It's not.
It is. And I gather a walk in a field, as long as you're not too close to anyone else, you're going to be fine doing that, surely.
Yes, yeah. All the advice seems to say that you can exercise if you go for a walk outside, as long as you're staying away from a safe distance from people, so to make us feel a bit happier. Well, thank you so much. I hope you will get on with your day as normal as you can be at the moment.
Yes.
And thank you for talking to us.
So there were some really great tips there from people. What did you take away from that, Helena?
Well, first of all, it felt so nice to actually talk to some people. Having to self-isolate can be really lonely. So talking to people that are in the same situation as myself felt really good. I guess the fact that when you normally work in an office, you see people on a daily basis and you chat about random things which will cheer you up, but you don't really think about it. So you just kind of take all that for granted. So what I took away from what people were saying was that don't use social media to overindulge on scary news or endless posts about no toilet paper, but to actually use it to reach out to people and just have a natter.
And you called me earlier on Messenger, didn't you, Helena? And we had a coffee and a catch-up, which was really nice.
Yeah, it was really lovely. I think this is something that people will be doing more and more now. I just have to remember to, get dressed if you're going to be appearing on camera.
Yeah, I'll have to remember that for next time. But I think the point about routine was really interesting in that interview, having a schedule and how that can really help your mind feel better.
And absolutely, I think this is the thing. It's not really about doing huge bits of changes, but actually the small things like, going outside, talk to a friend, try to eat something healthy, do some exercise, make sure that you take all your medications if you're on any, drink plenty of water and just open a window, get some fresh air into you.
And they're all quite small things, but just really important. Well, look, it was really great talking to you, Helena, and hearing all about your chats with Janice, Emily and Marissa. And we just want to let the listeners know, if you want to keep up to date with anything about coronavirus and MS, please look at the MS Trust website. We've got lots of information on there, and the link is mstrust.org.uk/coronavirus. We will update you with any news relating to the MS community as soon as we get it, so do keep checking all our social media channels for the latest. And I really hope you enjoyed this podcast, even though I know it's a really scary, horrible subject. But we hope you found it useful and there were some tips that you can take away from it.
And also a big thank you to Janice, Marissa and Emily for talking to us. Check out Emily's blog on the wibblydinosaur.com. It's excellent. And also thank you to the Major for the music. You can hear more on the major1.bandcamp.com. And finally, just keep safe out there.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.